Hello, everyone. Welcome. Shalom, shalom. It's great to have all of you connected here today to study a little bit of Torah. By the way, there is a problem with Facebook, but it's not our fault. It's not our fault. The company that we use to stream to YouTube and Facebook sent me a notification saying that they are having problem connecting to Facebook. So unfortunately, this is going only on YouTube. And yeah, hopefully they are going to solve it soon. The problem is, you see, YouTube and Facebook, they change their rules all the time. And these companies that they send information into their platforms, they have to adapt quickly. So I guess they are doing the best they can. So, who is here on the chat? We have Renato. Welcome. And you had a question. Is a recording posted? No, the class is live, but then eventually when the class is over, it stays there. So you can always go back. We have a playlist and you can play all the previous classes if you want. Rocky Paula, good music for celebrating an impeachment. Okay, Rocky. Come on. And by the way, be careful, guys, what you write, because we, just to avoid to get political or anything, we have certain keywords that are filtered. So if you use that in your chat, the messages won't go through. So you have to be careful what you write there. I won't tell you what words are in the forbidden list. You may discover it by yourself. Who knows? Debbie Pollock. You would like to dedicate the class in memory of your father, Misha Pollock? Oh, your father is Yortzeit. Okay, yes. We can surely dedicate this class to the blessed memory of Misha Pollock, Zichrono Libracha. Of course. Hello, Sarah B. Welcome to the class. And we are going to start soon. We have some messages. Let's see if this works here. Yeah, you can see all the messages there. It's great. Yeah, that works. Very good. So, we are going to study today Parasha Vaera, which is the second Torah reading on the book of Exodus, which is at the same time the second book in the Torah. But it's the first book talking about the people of Israel. You know, yeah, the book of Genesis, it's all about the foundations, I would say, for that, the foundations of Israel, but there is very little we learn about Israel as a nation. Perhaps at the very end, when we have Jacob and his children, but there's still everything is very green. There is not much for us to say that it's going to be a nation out of that family. It's just a family. Other than that, it's all about God and the way God rules the world. We are going to talk a little bit more about that in this class if you stay there. Eventually, we are going to discuss this, the difference or the different, the different experience of God that we learn from Genesis versus the book of Exodus, because it's kind of a different aspect. It is the same God, but is perceived differently in the two books. We are going to see that. And yeah, but you have to stay there. It's not at the very beginning, but you will see what I'm talking about. So, yeah. Okay, so let's get into the class. Too bad that we are not going on Facebook. We are missing so many faithful students that we have them here class after class, but they are probably wondering, where is Rabbi Mas? Did he forgot to go live? No, I didn't forget. It's just that it's not working on Facebook today. So, let's get into it. Let me open here my... Boom, here it is. Here it is. So let's start today by reading this couple of verses from the chapter 6 of the book of Exodus. And here we can see how even the Torah itself makes it very clear that the name of God that we are going to experience in the book of Genesis was not fully appreciated, understood, or experienced in the book of before. So now in the book of Exodus, we have this. Let's read it. God spoke to Moses. Okay? And God said to Moses, I am Adonai. And this is what gets tricky, because you need to understand the Hebrew, where the word used for God that we usually call Adonai, and I'm going to highlight it here. This one here is 4 Hebrew letters, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. So God spoke to Moses, and God said to Moses, I am Adonai, or basically we said, I am Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. But we don't know how to pronounce that name of God, so we say Adonai every time we read that name in the Bible. Okay? So, I am Adonai. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, different name, although I did not make myself known to them by my name, Yud Hey Vav Hey, or Adonai. Okay? So, here we learn that we have different names to talk about God. And again, this gets tricky because we know that God is one. We say it, every day. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. There is only one God. But yet, we use different names of God to make it clear, or to make it easier to understand what kind of aspect of God we are talking about. The rabbis explain that in general we use different names in different situations to make it clear that God had different aspects or different ways to interact with us. The concept of God is so infinite that it is impossible to understand everything. So we kind of compartmentalize God into different sections. It's like a big corporation that has within the structure different departments. So it will be easier for a person to relate with that company. So it's almost like we treat the concept of God in the same way. We use different names to quickly comprehend the aspect of God that is present in a specific situation. It doesn't mean that we have many gods. It means that we use these multi-names of God as a helper for us. Okay? So, of course, sometimes we just say God when we talk about God, but when you go to the Torah or the way the rabbis in the Talmud talk about God, they use different names. And then you have to be familiar with different names because it's not random. The name the Torah uses or the names the rabbi use are not random. They all have a meaning. Any comments about that? I don't know if you ever heard such a thing, that different names of God will relate to different aspects of God. I would like to hear if you ever learn that concept. So for that, you can use the chat. And remember, if you want to use the chat, if you are on YouTube, you have to log in into YouTube. Otherwise, you won't be able to do that. And if you are on our website watching this class, again, you won't have the chat. You will have to go directly into the YouTube channel so you can use the chat and interact with me and with your fellow learners. So, Cindy Singer, welcome to the class. You said, I've heard, but can't remember which each means. Okay. I heard that God, Debbie, you said, I heard that God has many names depending on his immanent transcendent. Yeah, that depending on his immanent and transcendent self. Yes, that's one of the aspects. And we are going to study a little bit about that right now. So let's go to the next slide. It said the 4-letter name for God, or sometimes pronounced Yahweh. I don't know if you ever heard the word in English, Jehovah, right? Like Jehovah Witnesses, one of these branches of Christianity. It is based on this name. And the fact that in some versions of the Bible, because that we say Adonai, right? Every time we read Yud Hey Vav Hey, we say Adonai. So what happened is, in order for us to remember that we have to read Adonai when we have these 4 letters in the Torah, the scribes, when they wrote the Sefer Torah, the scroll of Torah, they left the 3 letters, Yud Hey Vav Hey, but they used the vowels of Adonai, so the Torah reader will remember that you have to say Adonai and not Yahweh or Yehovah or something like that. So the problem is when the Bible was translated, those 4 letters with the vowels of Adonai became Jehovah, which makes no sense. It doesn't exist. It's not a name of God. It's just a mixture of 2 different names, the one that we don't know how to pronounce and the one that we do know how to pronounce, but they took only the vowels and created a new word. So Jehovah for us is, it doesn't make sense at all. It's not a real word. It's just a confusion between 2 different words. David Wilder, welcome to the class. It says, I was taught that the different names retributive to different editors at different period of times. Different period of time. So very interesting. You say that, okay, so that's more like a critical approach to the Bible. You say that different names of God were used at different times. Okay. Yeah, and names helps people relate better. Yeah. So let's go back to this. Let's go back to this. Okay, so let's continue. 4 letters, name of God, Yud Hey Vav Hey, appears many times throughout the book of Genesis, right? Because this is the tricky part. In the book of Exodus, God said to Moses, I never appear as Yud Hey Vav Hey to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And now we said, well, that's not really true, because the name Yud Hey Vav Hey did appear in the book of Genesis. So how is this possible that the book of Exodus says that never appeared in the book of Genesis, if in reality we know that did happen? So this is the explanation. Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, explains, the verse that not say lo hodati, I did not tell them, but rather lo nodati, I was not known to them. Obviously, our forefathers knew God's name, but as Rashi continues, they were never given the opportunity to recognize God's full nature. In what regard? They could not see how reliable and truthful God is, because they never saw God fulfill the promises God made to them concerning their descendants. So in other words, it's not that they didn't know the name of God, the patriarchs, but they didn't comprehend the full extent of that name, beyond the name itself. So now, Rashi will say that the name Yud Hey Vav Hey is directly related to this specific promise that God made to the patriarchs. So now we see that this Yud Hey Vav Hey seems to have something to do with a God that is really close and personal. It's not anymore the God that creates the heaven and the earth and everything and nature, but it's the God that communicates with the patriarchs and the God that makes a promise that is unique for them. That's another thing that is very interesting about the concept of God, because we will see that some names of God seems to make reference as this God that is up in heaven and far away from us. And some other names of God are the kind of God that implies that God is close to you. Almost like God is your best friend. And you can relate to God the way you relate to a friend. But we have the 2 aspects of God. And there is a tension between them. sometimes it's difficult to understand. Is God a macro manager or a micro manager? The one that is on every single detail. And I've heard theologians talking about both. Some believe that, no, I believe in a God that is a God of nature, but I don't believe in a personal God. And some people will say, no, I believe in a personal God. And a God that I can ask for specific thing for myself. But there is a tension in theology about the two. What do you think about that? I would like to know, what do you believe about the name of God? So, while you think about that, I will continue with the next one. Even Ezra and the Rambam maintain that El Shaddai refers to the powerful God of creation and nature, who revealed himself to the patriarchs without changing the natural order of the universe. Yud-Heh Vav-Heh changed the natural order of the universe in the plagues and in the splitting of the Red Sea in order to free the Israelites from Egyptian servitude. So here we have a clue on how the El Shaddai, which is related to the name Elohim, that sometimes we use to refer to God, the name Elohim, or everything related to El, is making reference to God of nature. Because let's put it this way, the fact that nature exists and the fact that there is an order in nature, it's a big miracle. The fact that there is a God that created this perfect mechanism called the universe that is able to function with a coherence and with a structure and with predictability. That is the greatness of Elohim, or El Shaddai in this case. So this name is the one we use sometimes when we talk about God of nature. But then we have the Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, that yes, is the name that we use to talk about this God, that even though that God created nature, God can also alter nature to fulfill a specific individual need. Is that clear? So we have again the two aspects of God, the God of nature and the personal God. So that's in a nutshell the meaning of these two names of God. Let's read a little bit more about that. It said, this rabbi said, the God of Genesis is El Shaddai, the almighty power and the sum total of all the powers of the universe, or also when we talk about Elohim, right? He created the cosmos before there was any human beings on earth. He effectuated the Big Bang. He sets limits to every earthly creation, and he did it all by himself. He is the God who revealed himself to Abraham and his family and established with them a covenant and mission to perfect the world. The God of Exodus is Yud-Heh Vav-Heh. Literally, he will effectuate and bring about redemption in history through the partnership of Israel and the nations of the world. El Shaddai is the God of creation and being. Yud-Heh Vav-Heh is the God of history and becoming. Center stage in Genesis is God alone. Center stage in Exodus is God and Israel, as we march the long, torturous, but guaranteed march of redemption. Any comments? You guys have been very quiet, either paying attention or distracted. So I would like to know that you're still there and you have something to say about this. What's your opinion? I'd like to see it in the chat. While you do that, I'm going to have a sip here. Are you guys typing? Or let's see. Maybe the chat is not working. Oh, my chat is not working. That's why. So hold on a minute, guy. I had the suspicion. I can see it on my phone that you guys been typing and nothing comes to my computer. So give me 1 second. I'm going to change my chat. This system that we're using today, not the greatest thing. Let's see if I can get it. Where would it be? Here. 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 Okay. Now I can see what you guys are saying. Okay. Now I can see what you guys are saying. Okay. Now I can see what you guys are saying. Okay. Now I can see what you guys are saying. Once God gave us the Torah. Now I can see what you guys are saying. Once God gave us the Torah. Now I can see what you guys are saying. Once God gave us the Torah. Now I can see what you guys are saying. God never limits us to God. I have it. So David Wilder, you said I had a teacher in the early 60s. David Wilder, you said I had a teacher the name of God in the early 60s. David Wilder, you said I had a teacher the name of God in the early 60s. David Wilder, you said I had a teacher be very interesting. That's an Aboriginal concept. David said Rocky Pollock. 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 And then we have okay. And then we have okay. And then we have okay. And then we have. Can you hear me better now? Just tell me if it's still looping. I hope not. I hope it's not looping now. It's all good. Okay. Whew. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Okay, so let's continue with this. Okay. We have here that another verse. Now it's chapter 6, verse 9. It says, Moses said this to the people of Israel, but they wouldn't listen to him because they were so discouraged, and the slavery was so cruel. And yeah, you remember the story when Moses actually went to talk to the people of Israel. In fact, he knew, he had the suspicion, he mentioned that to God before, they're not going to listen to me. Remember? When in fact says that, well, Moses was kind of right. They didn't listen to him. So, but here Moses gives a reasoning. He's trying to understand why in this world, these people that they are enslaved didn't listen to Moses when Moses came with a message of hope. God is going to take you out of here. We're going to a better place. We have a promised land and so forth. But they didn't listen. They didn't listen. They just, and Moses says, of course they didn't listen. They couldn't. They were so beaten up. They were enslaved. And not only enslaved, they were miserable. Because the way they were treated. And I think this is very interesting. The fact that sometimes in our lives, we go through this situation, but we are not as understanding as Moses was. Right? When we have conversation with people, and we said, I can't understand how you don't get it. Well, maybe if you were in their situation, you wouldn't get it either. And I'm talking about many different things in life. Or sometimes it is because you notice that other people, somebody who knows, who you know, maybe, it's not living the best life he or she could be living. They're making mistakes, making bad decisions. And you say, but how come you do that? Okay, don't you see that you're ruining your life? Why don't you change? Well, maybe if you were in their situation, you wouldn't be able to change either. Change is not easy. And you see, the problem is, even if you believe that you're good with change, the problem is we always accept change. Yeah, we embrace change, but only if we can control change. The problem with change is when you don't know that with this kind of change that you cannot control. Are you okay with those kind of changes? This is the kind of change that Moses or God was expecting from the Jewish people that they were enslaved in Egypt. I'm going to give you a new life. You have to change your behavior, your mentality. Yeah, but they didn't know what. They didn't know when. They didn't know what to expect. So it's very difficult to embrace that kind of change. And they were enslaved for so many years, hundreds of years, that slavery became second nature to them. They were already comfortable in their dysfunction. Let's put it that way. Comfortable in their dysfunction. And we all know that human beings, by nature, we run towards comfort and we run away from discomfort. So of course they will go back to their slavery, and we could see that pretty much in the rest of the Torah, where they always wanted to go back to Egypt. But this is why, even though we can see that the kind of life that they were having was terrible, how can you accept a life with somebody whipping you and telling you what to do and all these hardships? Well, eventually it happens to all of us. Not necessarily as this kind of slavery, but we get enslaved by other things for so long that we get comfortable in our dysfunction. And then we keep going back there because we already know the place. And that's human nature. Yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes that's the way it works. Sometimes that's the way it works. Any comments about that? No. Okay. So let's continue with let's talk a little bit more about this verse from the book of Exodus. Now, Rambam talks about it, saying, so they were so discouraged and their slavery was so cruel. Not because they didn't believe in God and His prophecy, but they just couldn't pay attention to His words because of the pressure from the hard work. And I believe this is something that we can all learn. I guess if you learn to recognize it in your life, it's better. That sometimes it's not that we don't have good advice. We don't have loving people that they are trying to help us. But we just cannot listen to them because of everything else going on in our lives. And if you're the one giving the advice, you could be more understanding. If you're the one who needs some advice, maybe it's good to realize and to learn from this Parasha that recognizing all those filters that we have in our lives is good. So we have a beautiful advice here in this Parasha. I hope everybody's still there. Sorry about the sound problem. It seems that technology is not on our side today. Too bad about that. Yeah. Rocky said, this is why we have to educate our kids. Yeah, we do our best. We do our best. We do the best we can. But sometimes we have to understand that you cannot give what you don't have, right? So that's why you will see sometimes certain habits being replicated from parents to children, because we give them what we have. And what do we have sometimes is what we got from our own parents. So sometimes it's very difficult to break a chain of how you say it, of dysfunction. It's difficult. Yeah. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. It's difficult. But I guess once that dysfunction is recognized, then you have a chance to change it or to educate your kids differently. Yeah. So, you see, this rabbi will say, it is difficult for us to recognize that hand of God in painful events. It's difficult. As Rabbi Zev Leff point out, this is a result of our own limited perspective. The Talmud asks, how can the prophet write, on that day God will be one and his name one? Are God and his name not one right now? You say this is from the Aleinu, right? We sing it every day. Bayom ha'hu, bayom ha'hu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo, u'shemo, u'shemo echad, right? This is, in that day, God will be one and his name one. And it's a good question. What do you mean at that day? Isn't that true now, today? God is one and his name is one. So why are we saying that this is something for the future? Well, the answer is that in reality, everything that God does is good, but in our current circumstances, we're unable to recognize this. We distinguish between the blessing, Hatov ve'hameitiv, who is good and does good, that we say upon receiving good news, versus the blessing that we say upon bad news, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, the true judge. You see, have you ever learned this one? When somebody mention or comes to you with news that somebody passed away, the Jewish way to respond to that news is saying out loud, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. Blessed be the true judge. In fact, this is the same thing the mourners say at the cemetery when they get the black ribbon during the funeral. They say Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. And then they tear the black ribbon. Because this is a blessing that we reserve for bad news. Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. But then there is another blessing that some people say when they receive good news or something good happens to you. You said, Hatov behameitiv, right? Who is good and does good. So we have these two blessings for two different situations. But let's go back to the text. It said, in the world to come and in the Messianic era, we will recognize that these are one and the same. We will see God's mercy in every event. Today, we do not pronounce the four letters name of God, which indicates his transcendence of time and his mercy. Then we will. In other words, this rabbi is also saying that's why we don't know the pronunciation of the name of God, Yud Hey Vav Hey. In other words, we cannot fully understand the whole aspect or the whole potential of this name. It's impossible to fully comprehend it in this limited world. That's why we still talk about good and bad or good and evil, because we cannot understand the full scope of the events. But once we are in the other side, world to come is something that sometimes is translated as the paradise or Garden of Eden or something that happened after we die. But it's the good place. The good place after we die, right? That's the world, the world to come. Once we are there, once we already lived our lives and we can see the world from the perspective of God, then and only then we will realize that there is no such a thing as good or bad. It's the way we perceive things because we cannot see the whole picture. That's why having two blessings in the world to come, one for good, one for bad, doesn't make any sense. Same thing with the Messianic era, which is talking about the time with we are going to, after the Messiah comes, and we are going to be experiencing the same thing. We can look back in history and we are going to be able to understand everything that we don't understand today. That's why we say on that day, God will be one and his name one, because today we don't see it that way. We still see, or we still perceive God doing good and doing bad. So it's almost like we have two different aspects of God. So it's not fully one. Yes, we say God is one, but we don't feel that God is one. But hopefully we will be able to not just say it, not just think about it, but to feel it in our guts. We might be able to experience that in the future. So David Pollack, you say, it is also like the world before man's first sin in the Garden of Eden. After the Messiah, we will know only good. Well, after the Messiah, I don't know about the first man. I don't know about about Adam and Eve, but I would say after the Messiah, we will know only good. It's not after the Messiah. The words good and bad are going to disappear from the dictionary. It's just going to be a thing. And there is no good and bad. It's all going to be the will of God, and we are going to understand exactly why God did what God did. That's the idea. That's the idea. The fact that we are going to be it. Yeah. I know it's tempting to say everything is going to be good. But the fact that we have the word good is because we also have bad. So good makes sense because it's the contrast with bad. But not having bad, does it make sense to keep good? I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it does. Debbie, you said again, we were giving full understanding and ability to comprehend things right now. We weren't given. Yeah. Well, I guess we were. Is what we talked last class. Is the hard work and long journey to develop and strengthen our emunah, our faith. So eventually you may have a glimpse, like a spark of this. There is no such thing as good or bad here in this world, but it takes it's a lot of spiritual work to be there. Yes, we can talk about it. Yes, we can even think about it, but from there to fully feel it, I don't know. I'm not there yet. Maybe you are, but I'm not there yet. Well, I can talk about it, I can teach about it, but to say that I feel that all the time, no. At least not me. At least not me. So, yeah. But let's go back to this concept that I mentioned before of understanding, where somebody is not there yet to understand God or to experience God the way you do. Okay? So let's read this story that I found. I think it's beautiful. About the Chafetz Chaim, this rabbi. So the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Israel Meir Kagan, was once sitting with his family and friends, and he spoke about the terrible situation in the Jewish community of his day. People had truly lost their faith in God and were moving away from religion. Reb Naftali was the Rosh Mesivta, high school principal, in the yeshiva in Radin, and he was one of those listening. He responded, "Why is this a great surprise? Even in Egypt, when the Jews still remembered their forefathers and also knew that the exile would only last 400 years, they were nonetheless so disheartened by the sheer amount of work placed upon them that they lost hope. In our current situation, our forefathers are long forgotten, and our exile is apparently endless. Why should we be surprised then if we see people losing their faith?" The Chafetz Chaim considered this and realized that he was right. And he said, "You are a good defender for Israel. Your words should ascend before the holy throne." What a great lesson on empathy. What a great lesson on empathy, understanding that sometimes, yes, we complain, people don't come to synagogue, People don't study Torah. Yeah, it's easy to complain. But it's not so easy sometimes to understand that behind every Jew that gets away from tradition, from religion, or from studying, it's sometimes it's a result of the way we experience life. So we have to be more understanding. We can do work in ourselves. We can try to plant a seed of a Judaism, if you might, in other people, but we still have to understand. Debbie, what do you say here? You need to understand emotional connection to God. Yeah. But this emotional connection is not as it's difficult to achieve. So, let's continue. Any other comment? Now, this is something that is very interesting. I want to share with you the logic that Moses uses here. Okay? And because there is a debate about what kind of logic is this. Look at this. Here Moses said to God, "Behold, the children of Israel have not listened to me. So how will Pharaoh listen to me? And I have sealed lips." Remember, this is when Moses said to God, I'm not a good speaker, blah, blah, blah. But look at the logic he's using here. The children of Israel have not listened to me. Okay? So how will Pharaoh listen to me? So, but again, what kind of logic is this? Why is Pharaoh's reaction related to the Israelites' reaction? This seems to be in a very different situation. We are comparing apple to oranges here. We are talking about slaves, and we are talking about the king of Egypt. Why would the king of Egypt react one way based on the fact that the Israelites are slaves? Doesn't make any sense to me, right? Even though, before I go to the answer, I want to see what Renato have to say. I really like the perspective. It is easy to think but difficult to practice. Maybe that's why the challenges of faith. Yeah. We are sometimes the result of our experiences, right? And we see so much that we perceive to be evil or godless that it's difficult to make the switch and to embrace that kind of change, to start looking at things differently or start discovering God behind things. It's difficult. It's difficult to be there. Yeah. So, let's go back to the logic of Moses, because for Rashi, the logic is flawless. Look, Rashi said, this is one of 10 Kal Vachomer, or also known as fortiori. For example, if a weightlifter cannot lift the stone, surely a child cannot. That's Kal Vachomer, right? It's like this kind of logic. So for Rashi, this is one of the 10 times that something was explained through Kal Vachomer. Okay? 10 arguments in the Torah. But I put it there, and I have to mark it, because I would say that I don't know why Rashi seems to read that into it, because the logic is questionable. The Torah says that the reason the Israelites did not listen to Moses was because they were so discouraged and the slavery was so cruel. We read that before. Inasmuch as Pharaoh was not a victim of such oppression, so perhaps he might listen. You see, the first reaction that I will have reading this verse is that the fact that the Israelites were slaves had nothing to do with Pharaoh. We already read before that the Israelites didn't listen because they were beaten up. They were abused. They were slaves. So of course they wouldn't listen. But using that to predict something that Pharaoh will do, seems a little weird to me. But nevertheless, Rashi seems to understand that the logic is the same. Why would that be? Here we have Rabbi Mordechai Kamenetsky trying to answer that question. And he will say, Moses knew that Jews inherently believe. However, the suffering of hard work and the evil treatment of Egyptian masters tainted their faith. But hard work alone does not taint faith. It is only when it is exasperated by the torment of the taskmasters and their cruel taunts. In other words, what I'm saying before, all the abuse that they suffer for so many years. But then this rabbi said, how much more so, he figured, will Pharaoh be inattentive of the command that Hashem is in charge and the Jews should be let free? If hard work stains the thought process, blocking the beauty of Hashem's words to filter through, how much more so, Kal Vachomer, thus the idolatry and heresy of Pharaoh impede them from penetrating. We look at Hashem's creation. We go to synagogue. We hear Musar, the words of the rabbis and all these teachings. We read the prophets, but somehow it does not get through. The words are beautiful. Those who hear them can be inspired, but so many impediments block our vision and our hearing, our lifestyles, our desire, even our work. If we open our eyes, we will see so much holiness. But in other words, this is amazing because basically what Rashi is saying when he said that we can apply the Kal Vachomer here, even more so, is that if physical abuse will create this block, this filter between ourselves and the words of God, how much more so living a life of idolatry the where Pharaoh was living. The sense that Pharaoh thought that he was God, right? So having that kind of mentality, living a life of arrogance, sometimes is even worse than living a life of abuse. And then at the end of the day, we'll see that eventually the Israelites accepted God. Rocky, what do you say? Does asking too many questions filter out his words too? How so? Asking too many questions? I don't think why asking too many questions will filter the words. I think questions are always good. Always good. In fact, in Judaism, this is something that I love about Judaism, that we are encouraged to ask questions. Yeah, there are two different things, accepting commandments. There are two ways to approach commandments and mitzvot. One is, I won't do anything until I fully understand it. And the other one is, I will do it while I try to understand. The second is the Jewish way. I'll do it even though I don't fully understand it today because I trust in God. But it doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to ask questions to try to understand. Yeah. Debbie, you said Moses didn't have hard slave work, yet he also doubted God, taking the Jews out of Egypt, and asked God why he's making life worse for the Jews. You see, Moses, we have to find a balance here, guys. I know people that they read the Torah and they only see negative things. Everybody will have a problem. Everybody will have a flaw, and they will be expert on finding for you all those flaws on every single character of the Torah. Then you have some other people that they will read the Torah and they will pretty much believe that everybody in the Torah is perfect. Never made a mistake, never doubted. And that's not true. We should understand that truth is somehow in the middle. None of the characters of the Torah were perfect. And we will see that even Moses, and yes, Debbie, you're right, even Moses doubted God. Because he was a human being. He was a human being. So this is also and understanding that will make us feel better. We will say, if Moses, the great Moses, greatest prophet of all time, if Moses was not perfect, maybe God will understand that I'm not perfect as well. We try to do better every day, but we have to understand that neither Moses nor us are perfect. Okay? And yes, Moses doubted. Moses has doubt. And yeah. So, let's do one more text here, and it's talking about that. Before I do that, Renato, you said, if there is no good or bad in God's perspective, was those historical things that happened to Jewish people good or bad? Well, you see, the thing is, for us, many things were bad. And I hope that one day, when I will be in the world to come, in the Olam Haba, I will fully understand the why. But today, I cannot. In my limitations, I can't. I try. It's not that I didn't try, but I cannot see anything positive or good about it. And it's something that sometimes we have to learn, because otherwise you're going to get stuck in life. You will never be able to overcome anything that you perceive to be negative. And that will affect your faith and will affect your approach to life. I know many people that they live bitter and angry because they cannot overcome something negative that happened to them, or something that they experience as negative. And most of the time, rightfully so. I'm no one to judge if that thing was good or bad. It's not up to me. But if you can understand, or you can somehow believe that eventually one day you're going to understand it, but now you trust in God. You trust in God. Because we believe that everything is coming from God. We don't have God and the devil in Judaism. Everything is coming from God. So if somehow you can believe on that without fully understanding the why, then you can move forward. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck for every time you hit a block in the road. It's, yeah. And asking why here and get stuck until you get an answer for that why. And until God doesn't answer your why, you cannot, it doesn't work. Sometimes you have to say to yourself, why should I put a question mark with God where God put a period, right? Why? No, just God put a period there. I don't understand it. I don't even like it. But I trust it comes from God. I move forward. And one day, not today, but one day, I will understand it. That's the idea. Yeah. So I guess we have time for one more text that I will share with you. And it's a little long, but I think it's very encouraging to help us improve our lives. And it says, look at this. It's the prophetic burden of the words of God through Malachi. Remember, one of the prophets. Because Malachi says, I loved you, said God. And you said, how have you loved us? And God answered, was not Esau a brother of Jacob? Yet I loved Jacob, but I despised Esau. In what way was this prophecy a burden? Right? It is such an uplifting statement. I despise Esau and I love Jacob. A prophecy that expresses God's love for Israel is hardly a burden. Because remember, we are the children of Jacob, right? Not the children of Esau. But there are two ways a father can love a son. And now we are talking about the relationship between God and people of Israel. One way is that the son has earned the father's love. He's gentle, considerate, studious, and courteous. It is also possible that the son is none of this and has really not earned love. However, he has a brother who is an absolute scoundrel. And compared to his renegade brother, he's a tzaddik. He's a righteous person. The father loves him because by comparison to his brother, who caused the father much grief, he's so much better. Right? We could be in this situation. Malachi conveyed the word of God. I love Jacob because he's a brother to Esau, who I'm despised because he's a rogue. Compared to Esau, Jacob is a tzaddik. The prophet said, if God cannot find anything more laudable to say about the Israelites other than they are not as bad as the pagans, then this is indeed a burdensome prophecy for me. We should merit God's love because we earn it. Moses was an advocate for the Israelites. He had come to them with the joyous message of deliverance, that God would liberate them from their cruel enslavement. Yet, they turned a deaf ear to him. Moses pleaded for them. They rejected me because they were oppressed, because they were so discouraged and their slavery was so cruel. However, I know that when I come to Pharaoh, he will reject me even though he lives in leisure. Therefore, the Israelites are not as bad as Pharaoh. Then Moses added, if I have nothing more favorable to say about the Israelites other than they are better than Pharaoh, then I have sealed lips. I am without words. This is hardly what I wish to say about my people. We should seek to improve ourselves spiritually. Living in an environment which is so immoral and corrupt, we may tend to think that because we are not as decadent as our neighbors, that is adequate spiritually. That is a mistake. We must strive to be virtuous on our own rather than being satisfied because we may be better than the wicked. We should constantly seek to advance ourselves spiritually. Yes. So I think it's a beautiful, beautiful Hasidic teaching in the sense that we live a life, and I experienced this many times in my life, many times, where we have this concept of good enough. Has it ever happened to you? That, this is good enough. No. If you could do better, don't settle with good enough. Right? Well, but compared with what other people do, I'm doing great. Well, that's not an excuse. If you can do even better than that, do better than that. You should always aim to develop your potential to the 100%, regardless what other people do or don't do. Don't settle on 70% because your neighbor does 50%, if you can do 100%. Right? So that is something that is very important for us to understand. That we should always aim to develop our 100%, regardless of anything else. Okay, never settle with good enough. Never, never. Not in Judaism, not at your workplace. Never. It's something that I learned to despise in myself. To never settle with a good enough mentality. Get rid of it. Always aim for excellent. Always. Okay, so that was the last teaching that I have for you today. Thank you so much for being there. I apologize again for the little, this little thing is technical difficulties that we had at the beginning. So I'm sorry about that. So like the video if you want. Leave a comment, right? Share it with other people. And don't forget to subscribe to our channels. So you will get notified every time we go live or every time we upload something to the network. Okay? So thank you again. Yes, Debbie, we should mention it again. I'm very, very delighted to dedicate this Torah class to the blessed memory of Misha Pollack, Zichrono Livracha, the father of Debbie Pollack. Yeah. So thank you all for being there. Next week, we have another class, Thursday at noon. Hopefully no technical difficulties. Then Have a wonderful day and hope to see you soon. Bye now.